While the world was watching America and Iran fight over the Strait of Hormuz, Saudi Arabia was quietly doing something nobody expected. Not a military move, not a diplomatic statement, a pipeline. A 750-mile pipeline running across the Saudi desert, that just became the most important piece of infrastructure on planet Earth. And when Saudi Arabia turned it on at full power, it changed everything. The world's oil supply, the war's economics, Iran's leverage, all of it shifted in one move that nobody in Washington saw coming. This is the story of how Saudi Arabia played the smartest card of this entire war. Subscribe right now, because this is the angle nobody else is covering. Well, let's get into it. To understand what Saudi Arabia did, you need to understand the problem first. On February 28th, America and Israel attacked Iran. Iran's response was immediate. They closed the Strait of Hormuz. The strait carries 20 million barrels of oil per day, roughly 20% of global seaborne oil trade, primarily from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iraq, and Qatar. All of it blocked overnight. Oil prices exploded. Global benchmark. Brent crude rallied to nearly $120 a barrel at the start of the conflict. The Gulf states were in crisis. Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter, suddenly could not export its oil. 400 loaded oil tankers were stuck inside the Gulf, waiting, going nowhere. Every day the strait stayed closed, Saudi Arabia lost billions. The world economy was bleeding, and everyone was looking at America and Iran, waiting for a deal. But Saudi Arabia did not wait. Most people have never heard of the petroline, but right now, it is the most important pipeline on Earth. Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline, known as Petroline, is a roughly 750-mile system that transports crude across Saudi Arabia, connecting the oil-rich eastern Gulf Coast to the port of Yanbu on the Red Sea. This pipeline was built decades ago, specifically for this kind of emergency. A way to bypass the Strait of Hormuz completely. No Iran, no IRGC, no blockade. Just oil flowing west, across the desert, to the Red Sea, and straight to the world. And here is what Saudi Arabia did that nobody expected. Where the east-west pipeline had been transferring an average of 770,000 barrels per day in January and February, Saudi Arabia cranked it up to its full capacity of 7 million barrels per day by the end of March. 7 million barrels per day, almost 10 times the normal flow. In just 1 month, Saudi Arabia quietly rerouted its entire oil export system away from the Strait of Hormuz. No press conference, no announcement, no drama, just oil flowing, while the world was watching the war. And Saudi Arabia was not alone. The UAE activated its Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, known as AIDCOP, which allows crude exports to bypass the strait via the port of Fujairah on the Arabian Sea. 2 pipelines, 2 countries, both routing oil away from Iran's blockade. Together, these 2 pipelines were partially replacing the 20 million barrels per day that normally flow through Hormuz. Not completely, but enough to stabilize global markets, enough to prevent the full economic catastrophe that a complete Hormuz closure would have produced. Energy analysts at Kepler confirmed Saudi Arabia and the UAE are already increasing utilization of pipelines that bypass the strait. This is what strategic infrastructure looks like in action. Built years ago, maintained quietly, activated in the exact moment the world needed it. And America had not planned for this. Trump was focused on the military solution, the blockade, the negotiations, the threats. Saudi Arabia was focused on the economic solution, the pipeline, the rerouting, the quiet victory. Here is why Saudi Arabia's pipeline move is more important than anything happening in the strait right now. Iran's entire negotiating strategy was built on one assumption, that closing Hormuz would cause so much economic pain that America would eventually give Iran what it wants. Sanctions lifted, nuclear program protected, Hormuz under Iranian control. Iran thought it had the world hostage. But Saudi Arabia's pipeline move undermined that strategy, because if oil can flow without going through Hormuz, Iran's leverage shrinks. Every barrel that flows through the petroline is one less barrel that the world desperately needs through Hormuz. Every barrel that flows through ADCOP reduces Iran's bargaining power. CNN reported there are about 400 loaded oil tankers in the Gulf waiting to get out, but the pipeline routes are providing crucial relief to global markets while those tankers wait. And now, with America's naval blockade starting today, the pipeline strategy becomes even more critical. Trump announced America will blockade all ships entering or leaving Iranian ports. Targeting Iran's oil exports completely. Saudi Arabia's pipeline gives the world an alternative supply route. Iran gets squeezed from both sides, America blockading Iranian exports, Saudi Arabia bypassing the strait entirely. The economic pressure on Tehran has never been higher. But there is one risk that nobody in mainstream media is covering. What happens if Iran targets the pipeline? Iran has already conducted drone strikes on Duqm and Salalah, alternative shipping ports in Oman that ships were using to bypass Hormuz. Iran has shown it is willing to attack infrastructure beyond Hormuz. The petroline runs 750 miles across Saudi Arabia. It cannot be hidden. It cannot be moved. And Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has already threatened to open new fronts in places where the enemy is most vulnerable. A pipeline running across open desert, pumping 7 million barrels per day, is exactly the kind of target that changes the war if it gets hit. One successful Iranian drone strike on the petroline would collapse Saudi Arabia's bypass strategy instantly, spike oil prices back toward $150 per barrel overnight, potentially drag Saudi Arabia into direct military conflict, and turn a US-Iran war into a Gulf-wide catastrophe. This is the specific risk that Saudi Arabia's pipeline strategy carries, and why the next few weeks are the most dangerous of this entire conflict. Saudi Arabia did something huge. While America negotiated and threatened, Saudi Arabia built an economic escape route for the entire world. 750 miles of pipeline, 7 million barrels per day. Quietly turned on at full power while nobody was watching. It reduced Iran's leverage, it stabilized global oil markets, it gave the world's economy a lifeline, but it also created a new target. And Iran, desperate, blockaded, and under maximum economic pressure, is now looking at that pipeline the same way it looked at those ships in the Strait. The next 48 hours will tell us whether Saudi Arabia's quiet power holds, or becomes the next flashpoint in a war that keeps finding new ways to escalate. Subscribe right now, because we cover every development as it happens. Hit subscribe, hit the bell. I will see you in the next one.